Okay, so hello everyone, thank you for coming. Quick overview of the agenda, and I'll give you a quick introduction as to who I am, and then something slightly different to what we normally get at VMUG. I'm going to give you a little history lesson, and this isn't like the History Channel where we're going to spend hours talking about random history, but it's a focus on virtualization. And then I want to talk about where hybrid cloud is going and how cloud is evolving the modern data center. And I'm going to give you some examples around how VMware is working with that as well. So first of all, I'm David Hill. I'm a senior technologist at VMware. I work in the vCloud Air network partnership team, so I am one of the leads who's helping service providers build and develop public clouds out in the marketplace. I've spent about 7 years at VMware. I originally joined into a team called the Cloud Practice, which was set up to deploy vCloud Director and go build public clouds. And then I've recently just left the vCloud Air public cloud, which is VMware's owned and operated public cloud service. And after about 3 years there, I decided it was a bit of due time for a bit of change. So I moved over to the service provider side. So instead of helping one service provider, I'm now helping over 4,000. So bit of a bandwidth issue going on now. But let's dive in. So let's start talking about the history lesson. And I kind of want to focus on where VMware's come from and where VMware is today. But originally, VMware was founded in 1998. Can anyone remember VMware being founded? Can you remember actually reading about it, though? No, they kind of just came from nowhere, as far as we're all concerned in technology. But in 2001, they launched a product called ESX version 1.0. Did anyone use the 1.0 version? No? No, I didn't either. I bet it wasn't very good. And then going forward into 2003, which is actually where I started using VMware technology, when you look at the, and apologies, it's very American orientated as usual, but the Fortune 100 companies, 80% of those guys started working with VMware technologies. Around the world, I was working for the NHS in the UK. This is when I started coming into contact with VMware. So in a very short period of time, the company was starting to grow. 2004, they held their first ever VMworld. Anyone go? No. There was 2 guys at VMworld this year who have been to every single VMware since they started, so they've now been given lifetime membership to VMworld, which is quite cool, you know. There's some stamina, though, to go for, what, 12 years, and they've been to both the US and the European ones. So I've been doing it 7 years, and I'm exhausted, so they've been doing well. And then, of course, we move on, and things like ESXi was launched. We all use ESXi now in our data centers, but it was a big cultural shift. Moving on there, VMware launched the vCloud initiative in 2008, which started focusing on essentially internal private clouds, although we weren't really calling them private clouds in 2008. And then going forward, we launched things like the Cloud Management Suite. And in 2013, which was a big moment in my career, VMware launched the vCloud Hybrid Service, which was essentially its own public cloud. So when you look at this history from 1998 all the way to 2016 now, where we're actually branching out into running public clouds on top of AWS and a lot of other service providers, it's quite a dramatic change in that short period of time. But realistically, what's that mean for us? Well, if you go back to the early days, everything was physical. Even when they launched ESXi 1.0, everything was still physical. Then what happened, and this is kind of where I came into play with VMware, was this virtualization technology. Everyone started going, oh, this is really cool, but I'm not going to put it in production. No way. But I will run my dev test workloads. And that's how I came into play with VMware. I was working in the NHS, as I said, and I was doing a big transformation project. And they had a massive budget for production, but funnily enough, they had no budget for any hardware to do any testing on. And we were kind of like, well, how can we build this greenfield site in production without testing it first? So from a VMware perspective, we took the virtualization technology, found some servers in someone's garage somewhere and managed to stack them in the corner of the office, and we built out a virtualization platform, and we did all our testing on there. We were building a very large Citrix farm for the whole of the UK's NHS. So it was kind of cool, because we could do all this testing on a very small footprint. So we saved a lot of money. Essentially, nobody would write us a check for the dev environment anyway, but we were able to complete the task that we needed to do. Going forward, what started happening was people realized they could save money with this technology. So they were like, oh, well, we need these production web servers. They're not really mission critical. It's pretty static. We'll move it into our production environment. So then, because it saved money, people were kind of more inclined to put it into production. Then as we go forward and we think about those timelines we were looking at a minute ago about the different product releases from VMware, you started finding a lot of companies had virtualization that was 50%, the production environments were 50% virtualized. I got distracted by this beautiful man walking in. Got your back. But of course, at this point in time, everybody was saying, well, my database clusters, I'm not going to virtualize those. I'll happily run Exchange and SharePoint, God forbid, in production on VMware technology, but I'm not going to put my database clusters on there. It's not going to happen. Guess what? Somebody could save some money, and they started running their database clusters on VMware's hypervisor. And it kind of goes on that trajectory of all of a sudden, as soon as people discover they can save money, then they're a lot more inclined to actually start using these technologies and deploy them out in production. And of course, now we're looking at a lot of the cloud technologies, and going back to the dates on the other slide, things like object storage are coming along. How many people are using object storage for anything, any public cloud storage for backups or anything like that? Okay, a couple of you guys. And then, of course, what happens is VMware launches a public cloud service, and Amazon have a public cloud service, and Microsoft have a public cloud service, and your CIO sits on his plane on a Monday morning reading in the Financial Times that now he needs to use a public cloud service. He has to have a cloud-first strategy. So what happens? His plane lands, he nicely folds his Financial Times up, goes into the office and sends his email to his IT manager, we need a cloud-first strategy, and I want it by next week. And you're kind of like, right, okay, come on. And he's like, nope, it says so in the Financial Times and in the Daily Express and whatever other newspapers, the Wall Street Journal, whatever he's reading, we need a cloud-first strategy. So you kind of, it's a very similar journey to what was going on with production virtualization and how we got into there. When you think about what happened then, it was all about saving money and ease of use. So essentially, what am I talking about, and why am I talking about this? Well, it's all about the journey, and it's a little bit of a VMware cliche. We do like to talk about journeys and rides and all those kind of things, but essentially it is. If you think about where you started in a production environment back in the year 2000, what you were doing. Anyone not working in the year 2000? Have we got, you weren't? Ah. Oh, little baby. For all those old guys who've got grey hair, especially Mike, when you think about what we were doing in 2008 for this guy, we were doing things completely different from a hardware perspective, but realistically, all we were doing was we were trying to keep the lights on, deploy new applications, and provide a service to the business. And we went on this whole journey of virtualization where we could consolidate all our platforms and all our environments into one, essentially, platform in that data center. So we went on this big virtualization journey. It's no different to what you're seeing today with the cloud platforms and how there's all this competition going on. You've got multiple mega clouds, you've got smaller medium clouds, you've got little managed service clouds. But but it's a big journey that we're all going on, because ultimately we're trying to save money and trying to save time, which again saves us money. So has anyone here got a cloud-first strategy? No, just me. Oh well. Yeah, you should put your hand up. You work in the cloud team. But what you're finding is out in the marketplace, the cloud is actually totally changing the dynamics of the data center. When you think about security aspects, how you secure things, it's not just about putting things on your servers in your data center, keeping them close, looking after them. Things are scaling dramatically now. So what's driving the hybrid cloud? What's driving people to move to these public cloud environments? Well, you hear all these ridiculous buzzwords about multi-tenant, single tenant, time to market, I need more agility in my environment, and pretty much anything as a service now is always out there. Oh, I use this app on the web and it's software as a service. Oh, well, I use this platform as a service, and I use this infrastructure as a service. It's all you ever hear. Certainly all we ever hear about is how we need to have this latest as-a-service product. You look at our new expense system. Anyone who follows me on Twitter, I apologize. But it's as a service, and it's a piece of shit. It's horrendous. It never works. It's always failing, but it's okay because it runs as a service. And that's kind of the direction we're going in. So, sorry, I shouldn't go there. I won't tell you who we use as our expense service. But it's those kind of aspects that are driving enterprises to move towards the cloud. And why are they doing it? Well, ultimately, the problem you've got now is you've got 24-hour news media that's always on. People are always wanting to know information. You've got multiple businesses around the world working in different time zones. You've got us guys who are trying to go on vacation with our family, sat on the beach, still getting our emails, replying to our boss. We never stop anymore. It's not like my dad's day where he went on vacation and the idea of a phone was impossible. Nobody would know where he was. Now it's a case of we're sat with our iPhones and we feel disconnected if we don't have them. So when you think about the kind of buzzword of digital transformation, and they were talking about it in the keynote this morning, banks are a great example. 50 years ago, what did you do with a bank? You put your money in, you took it out, and maybe they lent you some money. Now it's a case of you're on your banking app, you're checking your balances, you're transferring money around all over the place. You do a lot more with your bank today than what you ever did even 20 years ago, but we're doing it all on our phones now. That's why we see so many bank branches closing around the world, because we're doing it all on our phones. But they need to be able to develop that. So if you've got Bank of America who deploys this new feature that allows you to thumb some money to the guy next to you, well, all of a sudden, HSBC want that feature, and they need to get it out there. And it's those kind of demands that are driving this whole transformation and this data center change. Because waiting for someone to say, right, okay, I'm going to go rack some servers, it'll take 2 weeks for us to order them, get them delivered, rack them, get the VLANs implemented and connected to the storage so you can deploy an app, just doesn't cut it anymore. So we're seeing this big transformation out in the marketplace. And we've been talking about it for quite some time. But from that perspective, we talk about things, and VMware sees slight shifts in the market. But realistically, businesses on the ground don't just go, oh, it's new and shiny, we'll deploy that. It takes 5 years or so for people to actually start having confidence in things and deploying them and leveraging them for their environments. So I asked a question about who has a cloud-first strategy, and apologies, it is very US-centric, but 92% of the US IT professionals say that adopting cloud technologies is important to their long-term business success. Now, no offense, Mike, the problem with Americans is they're a bit too gung-ho and they still think they live in the Wild West and they run around with the cowboy hats on. The point is, though, that people are actually looking to do this globally. It's not just the US. Now, in Europe, we're a little bit more reserved. We've seen it all before. We don't tend to go for the version 1 shiny new product. We tend to wait until version 2 or version 3 comes out. So we let the Americans screw it all up, and then we can work with it later. Love you, Mike.
I'm Irish.
No comment. But when you think about what they're actually doing there, is they're saying it's essential to their long-term business success. So they're not doing it today, but they do see it as the future. So is it really happening? Well, the biggest number that always kind of surprises me is AWS. They're going to do $10 billion of revenue this year. So a bookstore that came up with a clever idea to scale its website has now got a $10 billion business from giving that out to its own customers and essentially productizing it. So when people say to me, oh, I don't think the cloud's really going to happen, it's just a fad, you know, a bit like Bill Gates and the internet, it'll never take on. $10 billion already says it's not a fad to me. You know, maybe enterprise businesses that we all know and worked in for years are going to take a long time to shift to that. But you've got all these new businesses starting up, Netflix, Uber, all those guys. Netflix are totally and 100% all in on AWS. They can't go anywhere else because they've architected their applications around AWS's services. But the interesting aspect is, from a business perspective, you've got AWS doing $10 billion, but 90% of workloads that are powering everyone's businesses aren't running in the cloud. So that, to me, is massive potential, certainly for someone who works for a cloud provider. You know, we can make a little bit of money there. We can help build services and deliver capabilities. Because they estimated that in 2015, that $175 billion of public cloud market funds were being spent in the cloud, but only $10 billion is with AWS. Now, the interesting aspect with these numbers is it all comes from people like Gartner, and they do kind of pigeonhole things quite dramatically. But what I want to say is, like, think about an example of a toy store. And I'll give you some examples towards the end of this session about that and how this kind of fits. But a toy store typically has a shop, you know, and then they have a website. And most of the year, they sell a very set level of toys to people, you know, footfall into the shop, traffic to the website goes on. But then you have Christmas that comes along. And then 2 months before Christmas, we're all like, right, we need to buy all this Lego, and we need to buy these go-karts and Disney princess bikes from our daughters and everything. It just goes insane. So the website traffic dramatically increases. But the typical way of doing that in IT up until a few years ago was have a load of capacity in the data center sat there waiting for Christmas. It's expensive to have it. You've spent a lot of money on it. You've outlaid a lot of capital on it. But it just sits there for 2 months of the year when we all go crazy buying presents for our kids. So as I go along, I'm going to give some examples about how you can, if you were a toy store, you can actually help leverage the cloud. Excuse me. But the aspect to this, and the whole kind of point of the presentation, is you hear lots of people talking about Docker and Kubernetes and how I need to go serverless and have all these different architectures for my applications. But realistically, when you think about where you are today in the enterprise, all your applications that are being used for your business are not going to go serverless tomorrow. You're not going to re-architect them. They're too expensive. So how do you start getting the benefits of the cloud leveraging those existing applications? One day they'll become legacy and maybe everything will run in the cloud. I don't actually believe there'll be a day where you just put everything in Amazon and go, yes, we trust you, Jeff. Life's great. You know, you make a great video program called The Grand Tour, but we're going to give you all our eggs and keep them all in one basket. I don't believe that day will come. Mike doesn't, because he's a security guy and he doesn't believe in those things. But when you think about what the benefits of the cloud, having multiple cloud strategies certainly helps. But there's a number of problems with the cloud that you have to actually fix as you go along and look at. So the first one's compatibility. Now, I asked this question at VMworld. How many people in here are not using vSphere? One guy put his hand up at VMworld. I couldn't believe it. He just ruined the whole presentation. But when you think about the public cloud, it's not really any different to what we do on-prem. It's a bunch of compute running a hypervisor with some storage on the back end and network connectivity. There's nothing fundamentally amazing about it at the hardware layer. But the challenge you've got is there's so many different cloud providers out there. VMware is one of them. We obviously use vSphere. Microsoft is another. Guess what they use? They use Hyper-V. Amazon, they use a modified version of Zen. You know, you've got lots of other service providers out there. Compatibility is one of the biggest challenges when you're looking at moving to the public cloud. So forget about all this newfangled architecture and using Docker and everything. You build your applications. Your applications today, if you wanted to go to one of those public cloud vendors, aren't compatible. So how do you migrate to the public cloud? Well, anyone here used to do P2Vs? Plate spin, all those kind of guys? It was awesome, wasn't it? It worked so well. You just set off plate spin, it took your images, it put them onto virtual servers, and you just went home and had a cup of tea. It didn't at all, did it really? Well, guess what? That journey, we're on it again. When you want to move to the public cloud, if you take these nice application migration tools, you know, River Meadow, Riverbed, all these guys, the migration, it's like, oh, I'm going to take this VM. It's got VM tools installed. I'm going to stick it in AWS. Oh, I don't need VM tools anymore. I'll pull that out, and I'll install the latest tools that Amazon need to run in EC2. Oh, my app doesn't start anymore. What's going on? You know, it's that same cycle all over again, which is why I was kind of talking about the history. We're back to where we were again. Great if you're a contractor. Not so great when you're actually having to do the implementation for your business. And then, of course, how do you extend and refresh your data centers? If you move workloads to the cloud, how do they actually connect? You could be the greatest developer in the world with this newfangled architecture, and one click it spins up 27,000 Docker instances. Where's it authenticating against? Somebody still has this thing called Active Directory. So how do you extend out to the cloud? And then ultimately, how do you refresh your data center? Can you leverage the cloud for refreshing? So how do we solve these problems with the cloud? Well, another consideration as well is what workloads are right. So you hear this terminology a lot from VMware, is in that by Pat estimated it at VMworld, that by 20-something or other, 90% of businesses are going to be out of the data center business. I don't really think so. Because the problem you've got is if you've got a 20 terabyte Oracle database, are you going to move that to AWS on potentially a 64 node cluster with like hundreds of processors? Larry will be happy. Your boss won't be happy writing the check for the license fees. So when you think about this, you need to start also considering what workloads are right for the cloud, what are suitable. You know? And this is why I don't think everyone's just going to move to the cloud in the next 5 years. Because these applications, some of them aren't suitable for the cloud. So understanding how these work and what applications you want to move to the cloud are very important. Come on, clicker. But one of the biggest challenges is testing and deploying to production. Now, when you look at this, now this is a typical environment that I used to work with a big bank in Switzerland. And you had all these different environments just to get a single application running in production. You used to have to test them. You used to have to go through integration tests, performance tests, staging, UAT, unit test, everything. And they used to have thousands of servers in a data center just to do this testing to put one patch in production. And it's ridiculous. And when you look at these kind of icons, the biggest one's dollars, but the worst one is the time, because if you're the guy who has to go through all this on a project, it's just so time-consuming, it's ridiculous. But it's expensive. You've got to have people monitoring them, managing them, and looking after these environments. So to kind of recap on that, the big challenges with the public cloud, when you're looking to how it can actually help with your data centers, is the compatibility and your application and data portability. Management as well is a big challenge when you're looking at the cloud and moving anything out to the cloud, is how you're going to manage it. You know, if it's in AWS, anyone used AWS? Yeah, anyone used Azure? Yeah, did it make a lot of sense as a vSphere admin? No? No, exactly. So you've got to learn new skills. And that's not insulting to them. You know, Azure's UI looks fantastic. When you log in and you get that nice map, and it looks really cool. I just have no idea where to click. But that's because it's not intuitive to me as a vSphere admin. I'm used to going into the C# client, bless it, clicking on my clusters, seeing my hosts, seeing my VMs, looking at the networks and the storage and everything. And then now we log into the web-based version, and we do a few more clicks to get to the clusters and the networks and everything. But it's all very intuitive. We know where we're going. We know what we're doing. When you go to EC2, I don't know where to start. Now, I can learn, but again, it's all time-consuming and very expensive. So how do you manage that? Well, when you think about the application and data portability, this is very traditional enterprise IT, a 3-tier web app, you know, and for the sake of space, I've got an app tier in a database on a single network, but you may have 3 different VLANs for this 3-tier application. You know, it's very typical of an enterprise. But the problem you've got is, if you wanted to take that to the cloud, how do you replicate that? Well, we have things like network virtualization, which really help when you want to move workloads around and have capacity constraints. But things like microsegmentation as well. But the biggest one is security rules, because when you've got people like Mike who work at your business and you breach security policies, they literally hunt you down. And nobody else does. But it's those kind of things. So how do you then, when you're thinking about trying to save time and money, and you've got this whole agile methodology built up and throwing all these DevOps buzzwords around, how do you get that application into the cloud without upsetting Mike? I'm glad you came, Mike. Well, from a cloud perspective, it's actually pretty simple. When you look at some of the options that are enabled with things like network virtualization and microsegmentation. A lot of the cloud services that VMware are building allow you to just literally pick that up, move it with the consistent security policies, and put it into the cloud. So it's a bit of a cliche, because everybody says to modernize your data center, you need to re-architect your applications. What VMware's saying is you don't actually need to re-architect your applications. You can just lift and shift them. And I'll give you some examples in a minute. But when you're thinking about that, being able to just move workloads around, essentially vMotion them from on-prem to the public cloud and back, solving capacity constraints is one of the key issues that the cloud has. How many people have ever run into capacity issues in their data centers? Run out of compute or storage? Probably storage. How many people run out of storage? Yeah, exactly. So the ability to vMotion VMs off to the public cloud when you are running out of storage solves a lot of problems. If you go to AWS, for example, you just stick it on your Amex card and then submit it as an expense report, not using our expense system. But it's very quick, it's very easy. You know, when you run out of storage and you have to go out and order new disks or go and get a new array, it takes forever. Because first of all, someone's got to sign off for the money and everything, and it becomes a big challenge. So how do you modernize your data center but still live within this enterprise IT world that we all know and love? Well, VMware has managed to add a little bit of confusion to the world with its cloud strategy. We now have private cloud, we have managed clouds, and we've also got support for mega clouds as well. But essentially, what VMware's doing is, and you've heard this for years now, is the software-defined data center helps you guys build your own private clouds in the data center. Nothing kind of revolutionary there. We've all been talking about it for a few years now. When you look at managed clouds, and this includes things like vCloud Air and VMware on AWS, it's not a managed service, but it is a operated data center by someone else. That's what the cloud is, really. Somebody else is managing those hosts, those storage arrays, those patches, everything, to give you a on-demand service. And then, of course, the mega clouds. VMware's driving a strategy around them to allow you to move to pretty much any cloud that you want, whether it's a vSphere-based cloud or an AWS or Azure-based cloud, and take all your security policies with you. So how are we doing that? Well, when you look at this, and the reason why I've added this in is because there has been a lot of confusion recently since we announced what VMware Cloud on AWS is, which Frank's going to talk about in the keynote. But essentially how it works is we now have a platform called the Cloud Foundation, which essentially is vSphere. But what you have is you've got all these different partner clouds and VMware operated clouds. And it's very simple. You either have VMware selling them, or you have somebody else selling them. So if you think about AWS, just purely AWS, or we'll pick Azure actually, that's owned by Microsoft, it's operated by Microsoft, it's a Microsoft data center, but they can still be part of a partnership with us. So when you look at IBM Cloud, vCloud Air Network, they run VMware services on top of their public cloud to help you guys move along. But one of the things about this is it's all about choice when you're thinking about cloud. So if you think about you go spin something up on AWS and then you decide, well, I don't really want to be in there anymore, you can move to a different cloud environment. You can come to vCloud Air, or you can go to IBM. You've got the choice of where you want to go. But it's very easy to move across those with the tools and the environments that you build out. We solve that compatibility issue. So how do you modernize your data center? Well, this is based on VMware's public cloud, because it's the easiest one, because I spent quite a few years there. But when you look at this, there's two key use cases that we're seeing customers trying to modernize their data centers with. Now, this one here, the data center replacement, as I mentioned, I personally don't think this is going to happen for any time soon. Anybody in the room actually about to shut a data center down to move to a public cloud? One guy. There's always one. Cool. That's pretty cool. I bet Mike's got some concerns for you on security. But typically, most people are looking to just have things coexist with their existing data centers. Maybe not outlay as much capital expenditure and move over to the public cloud, but they want to coexist. So they're doing a lot of this, data center extensions. And this piece here, the seamless portability, is the most critical piece, I think, for any kind of data center refresh that you're doing, any modernization or anything like that. Because essentially, how you move your workloads back and forth is really critical. It needs to be easy. You can't have a 3-day outage while you run a conversion on that VM just to bring it back from Amazon. And then you power it back on. Sorry about that, guys. I had to move it. Oh, I've run out of storage again. I need to move it back. Can you hang on 3 days, please, while I do this migration piece and test it? It doesn't work. So things like seasonal bursting, which is why I mentioned a toy store, is when you think about what you can do with that, a lot of customers now are looking at just being able to do this random bursting when demand and capacity needs. So you have your application tier running over here. It's load balanced, and typically on-prem, this is great for the toy store. You know, they've been having their web server running for 5, 6 years. Business is great. You come in, you hit your load balancer, and it just spins across a number of web servers. Nothing overly complicated. But what you can do is, at Christmas time, when this starts getting absolutely hammered and starts timing out because the load increases, your monitoring solution can then come over and say, right, we need more capacity out in the cloud. Let's deploy another load balancer out in the cloud. And then using tools that VMware provide, you can synchronize all your templates. Anyone using templates in vSphere? Cool. So when you think about what you've done there, you've got a replication of your gold builds, essentially, out in the public cloud as well. And then what happens is you run a simple Python script. And all it does is it deploys new web servers from your templates that you got in the cloud, deploys your gold build in a public cloud. And I use vCloud Air as an example, but this works with pretty much any public cloud. You deploy that, and then once that server's up and running, it'll just simply connect to your app build repository back on-prem and say, right, give me the latest build of the web software that I need to be able to start servicing web requests for our environment. You have an IPsec VPN in place, so that allows you to have connectivity. Doesn't have to be a VPN. It can be a MPLS, VPLS link if you've got enough bandwidth requirements, however you want to connect back. But then what happens is your load balancers just simply work together as a cluster. It's very simple in F5. You create a pool of load balancers, you tell them where they are, and they manage it accordingly. And then your web users there are simply accessing that web server, that website, over Christmas, absolutely, we hope as a toy store, buying tons and tons of Christmas presents, and they never get any slow access rates or anything on that website because you've easily spun up out in the public cloud. Now, the beauty of this is, all you do is you pay for those VMs that you're running there in the storage over a couple of months. You know, maybe it's on your credit card, and you just pay for it as you need it. What we would have done before, as I mentioned, is we would have had that capacity available to us in the data center to serve that environment for those 2 months of the year that we're doing all our sales. So it really helps streamline the data center. You automate everything, so you don't even have to do anything, which is Jörg's favorite thing. So when you think about what you've done there is your monitoring solution has essentially detected a high load on your web servers and gone and give it more capacity. And all you get is an email on the morning saying, done this. And from that perspective, you've solved a lot of the challenges that we have around IT from the time to market and the agility perspective. And ultimately, we've saved a lot of money. So modernizing the data center from that perspective isn't all about these newfangled apps and all that kind of stuff. I better go quick, I've got 5 minutes. 5 minutes? I thought it went to 1:45. No? Oh well. So when you're thinking about data center refresh as well, the things that we're talking about isn't necessarily, I just want to get out the data center business. But how many people have ever been involved in a business acquiring another business? Yeah. Pain in the ass from the IT perspective, because you've now got 2 separate data centers with 2 separate IT departments who like to do 2 things completely differently, and you found the business that you've just acquired the day before you bought them, they went and signed a lease on this really fancy data center. Looks great, but it's very expensive, so you need to get out of there quickly. So when you think about what you can do, is you can just start replicating your networks out in the cloud, leveraging network virtualization technology. Things like Hybrid Cloud Manager is a great product that allows you to do zero downtime migrations from your on-prem environment out into the public cloud. And then you just simply manage all those workloads using the vSphere web client. Excuse me. So you can move these very quickly to the public cloud to get out of that horrible lease that you've signed on that really fancy data center very quickly. So you've replaced this data center here by moving everything there, but you've just literally replicated everything you've done on-prem. Because in vCloud Air and other vCAN partner public clouds, you can replicate up to 200 networks. So from that perspective, we know that obviously from a VLAN perspective, you can do 4,096, and we're not quite there yet, but we have the ability in one virtual data center to create up to 200 networks. So you can easily replicate everything, move all your VMs over with zero downtime or very little downtime, depending on the type of workload, and move them over. Disaster recovery as well. How many people do disaster recovery today? Okay. For the people who didn't put their hands up, why aren't you doing it? Too expensive? You do it through backups or, yeah? Just back up and... So from a cloud perspective, it's very easy to do disaster recovery as well. It's very cheap as well. When you're thinking the biggest hurdle to disaster recovery is cost. You know, if you've got one data center, even if it's a colo data center, having to mirror all that hardware in the public cloud in another data center is expensive. There's no two ways about it. But what you can do is you can start building out your infrastructure services in the public cloud, things like AD and DNS. We call them pilot-like servers. But you can build that infrastructure out so you can replicate all your authentication over into the public cloud. And then using something like vSphere Replication, you have the ability to create your networks and then simply replicate those VMs into the public cloud. And then if this data center blows up, you just fail them over to the public cloud. Authentication happens over here with AD and DNS, but it's really easy. So again, when we talk about modernizing our data center, most people run away because it's all this serverless, fantastic Docker stuff that someone who's never coded since Turbo Pascal has no idea what they're talking about. It's really easy to modernize and update your data center by using the public cloud. So I rattled through those last slides rather quickly because the girl gave me 5-minute warning. But essentially, the thing I want you to take away from this session is while you hear Cormac talk about virtual integrated containers and deploying all these scalable options on vSphere, and you hear Joe Bagley come along and he talks about how the digital transformation and how everyone's going to be out the data center business, that's not necessarily the case. So while these are all the new buzzwords, we all know about the buzzwords, you know, back in the year 2000, that was going to destroy everything and the world was going to end, and we're all still here. So don't believe the hype all the time. You hear all the buzzwords, but modernizing your data center doesn't necessarily mean ripping it out and putting your trust in everything Amazon. So think about that as you're looking into this. And with that, I'll say thank you. I hope it was beneficial and hope there's some questions. Thank you. We got any questions? Yeah.
You didn't talk much about security.
No.
How secure you think the cloud actually is, and how sensitive material you would put into the cloud.
So from my own perspective, if I would quite happily move all my production workloads into the cloud, but what I would do is hire someone like a Mike to make sure that all the security policies are in place. The public cloud is no different to your on-premises data center. If you open a firewall on-prem and just have, I don't know, set a firewall rule to any, it's not secure. It's the same in the public cloud. When you look at vCloud Air, for example, we use NSX Edge gateways as the entry point into every virtual data center. That's essentially the edge of your network there, but it is exposed to the internet. Now, this is a tried and trusted secure platform that's had penetration testing, got all the certifications, but it's only as secure as I make it. And from that perspective, you need to have the same considerations moving to the public cloud as you do on premises. In my opinion, there's no difference. When you're designing something to go in a data center, every step of the way, security needs to be considered, because in today's world, it's probably the most critical thing to your business surviving. If you're going to the public cloud, there's no difference. Every step of the way, again, you need to consider security. But the public cloud is just as secure as the private cloud, because you can encrypt everything in the public cloud, you own the keys, but ultimately, the biggest failure for security comes down to either one person or your processes, in my opinion. Mike might have a different opinion. But typically, it's not a technology failure, it's a people or process failure. That when you look at target and all those kind of things that happen. But I didn't touch on it because we could spend the next 6 weeks talking about security. But yeah, that answer your question?
Yes.
Got anything you want to add?
Yeah, if you look at some of the larger cloud vendors, they have very large, very, very good security teams, probably better than what many customers can afford. But like Dave said, there's multiple layers of responsibility, and you can't just say, well, they'll take care of it and I don't have to worry.
Yeah.
Right? You know, you're the weakest link is the person with the most privileges.
And that's ultimately what it comes down to. You know, it's like even your home network. You open your home router to the world, then something's going to happen on your laptop at home. You can pretty much guarantee it. So you need to lock it down. And the problem is, and I've heard people say, oh, I've moved to the cloud, I'm now secure. No, you're not. You need to take those design considerations and business requirements into consideration in no different way that you would do it if you were doing it in an on-premises data center.
There was a company that moved to Amazon a few years ago. They were cloud, 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 but they didn't secure the management access to cloud, 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 right? They didn't have two-factor authentication enabled. Not just, you know, they couldn't turn it on. They could turn it on, they just didn't. Well, one of their admins got compromised. The bad guys went in, changed all the passwords for everything. Oh, by the way, they were backing up to the cloud, the same cloud, with the same passwords. The guy goes in, changes everything, sends them a note saying, well, if you want your company back, please deposit X amount of money. They said no. He went, okay, delete. And then overnight, that company went away. Not just, you know, they stole credit cards or anything like that. The whole company, all of its IP, all of its backups, all of its servers, all of its data, gone in the span of 24 hours. That's massive. So the responsibility still is on you. And for things like regulatory compliance, like PCI compliance, you may be running it in the cloud, and they may be saying, we're PCI compliant and we pass audits and everything else, but ultimately, you're the one responsible for ensuring that they did what they are supposed to do.
Yeah. It's like your car. You park your car in a multi-story car park with the keys in it and go back and wonder why it's not there anymore. It's your fault. If you park your car in the car park and it's locked and it's got its alarm on and everything, you're kind of like, well, why has my BMW alarm failed and it's been stolen? You know, at one point it's your problem, but again, it's where you park your car. You know, it's those kind of aspects, so, yeah.
At home, close gates and keys inside.
Yeah, exactly. So, put a big wheel brace clamp on it, and if you're in America, strap a few guns to the top, and it'll be safe. So, brilliant.
We keep them concealed.
Yeah, some states.
Yes,
Any other questions? And then Mike can talk more about his gun collection. So, any more? Cool. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, guys. Thanks. Thank you to Mike as well.